Hi, you guys. So I'm traveling, as you know, with my son, and I had to take pause yesterday, July 11th, when I heard the news that Jen had pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and had put forth against her. The other count had been mainly focused on money laundering, which they forgave. She is now agreed to 14 years, up to 14 years in prison, and she has to pay over the rest of her life. It's 20 years plus another 20, usually $9 million plus $6.5 million that she forfeits, which I'm less familiar with forfeiture, but I believe that is money that's been frozen somewhere in some account and they want to just take it. So they, I guess that's the difference between restitution and forfeiture. Restitution, you pay back. Forfeiture sounds like you give up. So anyway, it's a nuance, but I thought I'd shout that out. And the government always makes the judgment due immediately in its entirety so that they can stake claim on any assets that you have in the future that they choose to take, which obviously makes life very difficult if you don't have a spouse or significant other to support you. Coach Shah, thankfully, if she sticks with her while she's in jail for 14 years, can at least support her in her life, but she is going to struggle beyond that in any capacity because Jen Shah is now civilly dead. And jail is horrific. You can be raped and murdered and killed in jail. There's actually consultants that you hire when, especially white collar people do, to help them survive prison because often you can actually really get hurt there. Even by the own guards that manage those prisons. I've interviewed quite a few people that have worked in the private prison system that have said that things that we saw in Orange is the New Black and things that they witnessed are quite horrific. I don't know who's policing that system, but someone needs to look into that pretty deeply. I hate hypocrisy. Anyway, so Jen Shah is going to have more punishment when she comes out than what she's going to experience in jail, which is hard to believe when you're facing things like murder and so on. And why is that? Well, Jen Shah, unless she can get another TV gig, which I'm sure she probably is working on right now, because I'm sure A&E and some of the other channels have reached out to her to try to cover her experience in prison. I don't know, 14 years is a long time, but maybe some of it could protect her. She won't be able to travel for years. She'll be stuck in a territory in her state like jail. Jen will never be able to vote. She will never be able to rent an apartment in an upscale or even mid-scale community. Jen will never be able to get a traditional job. She will never be able to vote. She will never be able to easily go through things that other people do. She will be disqualified from opportunities that exist for other people. She will never be able to do a job in a similar sector, even if it's like loosely similar. And she will never be allowed really to own anything that has any equity in it again. Her children will be grown up by the time she gets out. All the technology will be different in the world, and her husband may or may not be. As you'll recall, Stewart, her assistant or co-conspirator, got 6 years in prison and 5 years supervised release. Both Stewart and Jen Shah were considered by the government to be the most guilty in this scheme, and this scheme went way above and beyond, as you guys probably saw in Shah Shocker, than just their little, like those, the three people involved in this indictment. So they really saw her as a mastermind to a degree of a scam that was broader, which is why the punishment is so much. And since she didn't take accountability for it early on, and she kind of teased the government on the TV show and in her media interviews, they came so hard for her. They gave her no break. It could have gone up to 30 years if she had gone to jury trial, but I honestly think that, she'd probably have ended up around the same amount that she's getting now, to be honest. I don't think the government gave her much of a break here. They kept the restitution amount super high. All the things that would give her the maximum amount of time, they kept in place in the plea deal. Now, thanks to Ronald Richards, I did get the document, which is the key document to look at in this thing, which is the offer that the government gave to Jen Shah's attorney that they were willing to accept after meeting with Jen, which I think they must have done last week. I think there was a photo floating around of her and Coach Shah, like down near like the legal courthouse or whatever. That must have been them meeting with the prosecutor. I have a feeling that during the interview with Jen, if they did in fact meet with the prosecutor, Jen did her best to tell her side of things, but they must have had explosive evidence that they presented to her. And so as a result, she decided that the best thing for her to do was to change her plea, because there's something that she saw or heard that she felt like the jury was never going to get over. So, it doesn't always go down like that, but in this particular instance, because she was so firm in her not guilty plea, I think that's what happened. One more thing that the government does is they constantly keep you in a state of audit. So it's like being in an IRS audit for the rest of your life. It's tough. Now, a few people said that Coach Shah somehow was implicated because he had been living off of the money that Jen Shah had been making in her business. And the government, I don't believe, sees it that way, because they would have taken action against Coach Shah as well, and in terms of criminal action, and they didn't. So I think they just, there are people that are sometimes implicated just by proximity to someone, and it doesn't mean that they're guilty of the crime. It just means that they happen to be there, or they were involved in something and they didn't know what was going on. They must have taken a view that Coach Shah was ignorant to the criminality aspect of her indictment because he wasn't implicated enough to charge. So you can't ignore that fact and just be like, oh, he must be guilty, because obviously they've taken a position on that. Now, Coach, one thing that I thought was really a little dangerous in this settlement is they can still come after her for tax evasion. So if she didn't disclose the money she was making properly in her taxes, they can still come after her for that, which was pretty scary. And also remember, this is only in one jurisdiction. So if multiple jurisdictions were impacted by Jen Shah's actions, those jurisdictions can indict her as well on the basis of this, guilty plea. So she could essentially, like, let's say she did business in Utah could come after her and say, well, we want to get you for wire fraud because you did transactions in our territory. Now, I don't believe you can do double jeopardy. So like, it would have to be different transactions. It's possible, if there was something that was only, that New York didn't consider and happened in another territory in a similar way, then that's something she would have to be worried for. Anyway, the key document I'm going to put into the Patreon that Ronald found, that I know is the one to look at, because obviously he posts pretty much everything. This particular one is the telling one. It tells you everything. I'm going to give you a little snippet of it because I think it'll teach you a lot about the system. So in the key document, the government basically is like, look, lady, after we've looked at everything and heard from you and listened to what you said, this is what we think you did wrong. And this is where this is as far as we're going to let you off the hook, basically. And so they say, look, we're going to give you a base level of 7, which, any offense pretty much is a base level 7. And this is their point system that I always talk about, where they arrive at your punishment. Okay, they can give you breaks in this point system or they can destroy you in it. Okay, so basically what they did is they gave her the base level 7, then they went up 18 levels because they really threw the book at her in regards to restitution, which, by the way, is where they could have given her a break. So they said that they're putting her within the $3.5 million to $9.5 million, theft level, basically, which goes up 18 levels. Then they said that they were giving her another 4 levels because it resulted in substantial financial hardship to 5 or more people. So they made her admit that there are 5 or more people. They also said that that she went up another 4 levels because she was an organizer of the crime or a leader in the criminal activity involving 5 or more participants, which means that's the mastermind points they throw in there, okay? And that means they didn't want to give her a break on that. They could have given her a break on that one. It says the offense level increased by 2 levels because the defendant willfully obstructed or impeded or attempted to obstruct or impede the administration of justice with respect to the investigation, prosecution, or sentencing of instance offense. So they didn't just see her as someone going through the indictment process. They saw her as trying to stop their investigation or hurt it in a way that isn't legal. Then it says assuming the defendant clearly demonstrates acceptance of responsibility, they basically will give her a 2-level reduction. So they did throw her a bone that if she signed this deal, she'd get 2 points off. And that's standard. In addition to the restitution and the forfeiture amount, which you guys know about, she also is going to be required to pay somewhere between $35,000 and $350,000 in fines to the Justice Department. So here's my opinion, you guys, in case you care. My first opinion is that Jen Shah ran her legal case like crap, and she should have been talking to the prosecutor from about halfway through pretty decently with her position if she really did believe she was not guilty or her viewpoint. That's number one. So I'm like, the legal team should be ashamed who represented Jen Shah, in my opinion. Secondly, I want to say that Jen Shah should not have gone publicly on so many occasions screaming from the rooftop that she's innocent and saying, blaming race and all this other stuff, because there is issues with race and the Justice Department. And when it's obviously not true because they are guilty, that's really disheartening because there's many instances where people are prosecuted because of race, okay? And they're prosecuted worse than anyone. So I just want to say that's a real thing, and Jen took away from that. Jen, continuing to shoot the TV show for survival reasons, I get, but it is the reason her punishment is so harsh. Don't kid yourself. Reality TV got Jen Shah a few extra years in her punishment, I have no doubt. And for that, she paid a high price for fame and for continuation of her fame. As far as, whether or not her friends should stay her friends, I think really the question comes down to if she is guilty indeed of defrauding all these old people that she is now admitted to doing, then how do you ever know that she's really being a friend to you? Jen once said to me a whole bunch of negative stuff, right? After Shah Shocker, I forget what it was now. And I said, I've been through the system. Let's see how you do. Okay? So she didn't do so great. Anyway, it's never good to be judgy, is it? Oh, and what a joker. Mary Cosby comes out of nowhere and posts a response to Jen Shah being arrested, and look at the irony of it. This coming from a woman who supposedly stole, allegedly, from her members of her church. Please. And on that note, see you in the Patreon. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. You never know what you're going to get on this channel.